Hello, and welcome to this community chat offered by Journey to Baptismal Living. We're an ecumenical network that provides resources for the catechumenal process for adult initiation, adults seeking baptism, reception, or confirmation. And I'm Larry Aaron. I'm part of the board of Journey to Baptismal Living. The catechumenate is part of the renewal of Christian liturgies. It started in the 50s, um, when the question was, Christianity and our practices have been affected so much by history and culture and misunderstandings. There was a whole hope that by going back to the early church, especially the church of the first, let's say, 4 centuries, we could get a sense of how did they celebrate Eucharist and baptism and different things like that. And that's where the catechumenate's resurgence or renewal come from. How did the early church welcome Christians? And there's a wonderful quote by James Dunning, who is one of the early pioneers of, really advocating for the catechumenate, that goes like this. Before there was a catechumenate, there were sponsors, sponsoring, welcoming communities of people who were convinced that Jesus was good news for them and that he might be good news for others. So from the year 30 to the year 180, there's no formal catechumenate structure or institution. There are only Christians sharing their lives, sharing both the stories of Jesus and their own faith stories with other people. That really sums up what a sponsor is. So as we begin, I just would invite you to ponder in your own mind. When you hear the word sponsor, what comes to mind? What does a sponsor do? Well, sponsors are different than godparents. Godparents are ideally lifelong relationships. And in some cultures, this is really a big deal to be a godparent. Sponsors are primarily committed to the duration of the catechumenal process, hopefully as early as possible, although many times the relationship does continue after the formal um, ending of the catechumenate. A nice way of talking about a sponsor is a fellow pilgrim in faith. They come to know the candidates in their faith journeys, and because they're part of the worshiping community, they represent the community itself. So, what are some qualities that might be helpful to pursue in thinking about what a sponsor is? Well, they're already members of the congregation. They're usually not spouses, usually of the same gender of the candidate. Sponsors are already active members of the congregation who already know the lay of the land. They know the patterns of worship, the paths of service that make up the congregation's life. They don't need to be perfect. They don't need to have all the answers. They do need to be people who are seeking growth in their own lives, in their own journeys of faith. They're people who can articulate in their own way what faith means to them on a day-to-day basis. They're willing to commit to the relationship and process of being a sponsor. They need to be open about their own faith journey and able to walk with others in a relationship over time. Hopefully, they're easy to talk to. They're able to share intimately and risk some vulnerability. They're able to share their own doubts and pains. They have a sense that indeed God is alive in their lives. They're affirming people. They basically feel good about themselves as children of God and followers of Jesus. They have a pretty good sense of who they are. They're able to be advocates for those that they walk with. So they're caring people, they're hospitable people. More importantly, they're good listeners. They're able to keep appropriate confidences. and they can be present to the candidates going through the catechumenal process, and they represent the congregation. So what are some very concrete expectations of a sponsor? Well, formally, they're really meant to regularly participate in all activities, the actual sessions of the catechumenate, and especially the rites. They present the participants in the catechumenal process to the congregation. But informally, it's really important that they meet with the person they're walking with for coffee or lunch, just to see how things are going. And they act as a bridge to give feedback to the catechumenate team to improve the process and experience. Now, no one's born a sponsor, so they need to be willing to be trained, informed, and supported by the catechumenal team. So where do you discover these folks? Well, like most ministries, the season's open all year. You want to really be on the lookout for members as you get to know them that have those qualities that we just explored. They need, and what most people have found, even though you can invite people in a communal way to be sponsors, most of the time, the individual personal invitation is what's most effective. Now, their preparation needs to happen before they walk with their candidate. They need a basic understanding of the catechumenate and the history of the church. They need an overview of the catechumenal process with its four movements or stages. They need to have a sense of what their role is, and they need some practice in sharing their own faith stories. Ideally, in a group of sponsors, it's a mixture of gender and age and experience. And many times you're really looking for sponsors who may have similar backgrounds or interests as the candidates. Now, for many sponsors, what I've noticed is they change as much as the candidates in the catechumenal process. And so it's really important that the catechumenal team be there to support these sponsors. They need to be available. They need to contact each one of the sponsors and simply ask, how's it going? How's it going for you? How's it going for their sponsors? And from time to time, it probably would be wise to have opportunities where they can get together with other sponsors and the catechumenate team and just share, how is this process affecting them? So I'd like to go back to that quote from Jim Dunning, which I think sums it up so well. Before there was a catechumenate, there were sponsors, sponsoring, welcoming communities of people who are convinced that Jesus was good news for them and that he might be good news for others. From the year 30 to 180, there was no formal catechumenate institution or structure that was universally practiced by the early church. There were only Christians sharing their lives, sharing both the stories of Jesus and their own faith stories with other people. So I invite you to explore a couple resources if you want to go deeper. These are, on our website, journeytobaptism.org. One of the most helpful overall resources for the catechumenate was made by, some of the folks that have been involved in Journey to Baptism, and that is this book, Go Make Disciples, An Invitation to Baptismal Living, which is published by Augsburg Fortress Press. It comes pretty close to being a very nice handbook for the catechumenate. And then there's Dan Benedict's book. Dan wrote Come to the Waters, Baptism and Our Ministry of Welcoming Seekers and Making Disciples, which is published by Discipleship Resources. This has some really wonderful reflections on the ministry of sponsorship. And then a little bit harder to find, but really worthwhile, because it's now out of print, is this book, The Catechumenal Process, Adult Initiation and Formation for Christian Life and Ministry. It was published in the late 1980s by Church Hymnal Program Publishing of the Episcopal Church, right after the Episcopal Church in its General Convention basically affirmed the catechumenate as the preferred way for adult initiation. It has some wonderful examples of what the ministry of sponsorship is. So thanks for taking this time to ponder what the ministry of sponsorship is. I invite you to not only support sponsors, but be on the lookout for people who are curious, willing to share their own stories and vulnerability, and want to walk with others in their walk of faith.